Hello, everyone. Greetings. Welcome. It's a great pleasure to receive you in this 2020 The Gathering. So this is basically a meeting, online meeting, and I'm not sure if you can hear me well. I think everything is okay. Yeah, everything's okay. So this first minutes will be just for do a small introduction, get people together and connecting. We all know these things are very hard to be perfect at the first shot. So I can announce you that we have a loss for this afternoon. Nicholas, you won't be able to join us. He's working in Nairobi in Kenya, and there's a lot of power loss, so we won't be able to count on him. Anyway, we have a big and interesting lineup for this 2020, the gathering related with smart cities. But what the question is, we are doing a lot of questions about the smart cities. We get a lot of definitions, we get a lot of insights, a lot of events. Actually, it's something that has become part of our lives. Even people that never heard about smart cities, they are aware that something is going on. Even though we are confined, lockdown, we are afraid of virus, COVID-19, all this brought to light also some topics related to surveillance, privacy, health, and other kind of problems that we used to live when everything was normal. But now everything is becoming again back to normal. And the question we need to do ourselves, I believe, is do we want things to return to that normal we used to be? Massive tourism, pollution, problems with resilience in cities, big floods and big fires, everything that came to be a problem for our society. So this is some of the topics that we are bringing today. But also we need to understand a little bit if there's more than one path to walk in this smart cities topic. So as all of you can see, we have chosen for this purpose today. We chose to use what is the yellow brick road, which actually is part of an amazing movie, Wizard of Oz, and the story I'm pretty sure everyone knows, and why we do this metaphor for the smart city. Because that's one that I'm going to speak about it later. A lot of other speakers will speak about it also. But we need to have a lot of content, not only related to technology associated with cities, but also topics related with investment, with the sustainability, with the growth, economical growth, but also related to happiness, wellness, spiritual well-being. A lot of topics are not just related with the technology itself. So that's why we bring the Wizard of Oz like a interesting path to follow, because some cities already have a lot of the potential to just are not aware of it, or they think they should be different, or they should imitate other cities and do things different. And at the end, a lot of cities are already smart in this process. So the program for today is it's not big. It's not like we are in a physical event with everyone gathering together. I have those amazing coffee breaks that we used to organize in our association with Zoom Smart Cities. Most of you know these events we organized since 2016, and we have a lot of people that participate in those events. I can mention Joe Dignan, for example, who is one of our co-founders for the association. He was in Lisbon in 2016. Amazing presentation he will give us today. As usual, Joe is one of the pioneers for the smart cities, and we are looking forward to listen what he's going to say. And of course, we have the association started in 2018, and we have this month included, not this month, sorry, in May, we've been lost with the COVID-19, with the lockdowns. We're not sure what day is it today. Yes, it's 12 already. So a lot of people, we made an expansion for this association, and we have brought inside our organization new members, including two of them will be speaking today, and they are impressive backgrounds, like Team Vieira, special advisors for the association anyway. Team Vieira is based in Portugal, is an entrepreneur, investor, someone that's working with the startups, working with the tourism, working with a lot of topics, and then also May Wen, that I'm going to go deeper for her background in a few minutes. So this is something that we created for this day, and not really because there was a specific reason to organize this event, but just because we all feel that, at least in our association, we feel that we need to bring some more content rather than just start talking about smart cities, industry, technology, sensors, IoT. Everything is part of the smart city, but we also need to put people talking about other things. And I'm going to go deeper on this subject because it's really interesting what we are discussing in smart cities by now. And cities and administrations and stakeholders, we all have to make sure that the future is based upon human values and especially ethics and transparency. So this is the pillars of our association. That's why we brought to you all this specific work, and we are looking forward to work with the cities. So I'm going to introduce now the first speaker, and more could be anyone, but we choose to open with our president of the association, Carlos Neves. He has a degree in telemechanics, engineering, and is working as a professional since 1990 as project engineer, and from then until 2011 was quality engineer, quality director and CEO in several Portuguese private companies. He's an entrepreneur, he's director of these companies, Seven Forma, and he works also in business developer CCG, Computer Graphics Center in the Technology Interface Center of the University of Minho in Portugal, consultant of innovation, knowledge transfer, energy development, territory, and cities, and regional and national leader in the order of engineers. Professional experience is wide, as you can check in our website. Is all the profiles of our members are there, featured there, and we are going to promote them, of course, because our association is supported by all this amazing backgrounds we have. Carlos, welcome. I'm going to. We have a small, slight problem with his presentation. I don't know what's happening. Some problem with the virus in the computer or something. I hope it's not COVID-19. Carlos, you can connect your microphone, and I'm going to do something a little bit more weird, because I have to choose from other
So, hello everybody. First of all, I want to express my greetings to you all, and hopefully I hope you are well in terms of health, of course. And while Victor is sharing my presentation, because cities are older than states and countries, and they are, of course, the foundations of our culture and our identity. And I strongly believe that they will prevail to the inevitable transformation of states and countries that are going on right now. And this pandemic crisis shows us very well the need to that transformation. And a transformation in a multi-level transformation, not only in terms of governance, but in terms of habits, in terms of the new normal that we are facing right now, and in all of our way of living. And I think cities will prevail in terms of the role that they are going to make and to play in the near future. And there are as well key elements in society's development, social cohesion. And we are facing now a very strong crisis, and cities, and particularly municipalities, allow me to speak more with the Portuguese experience because I know it very, very well. But here in Portugal, the municipalities are making the network of cohesion that the central government could not do in so effective way. And cities play a very important role in this social cohesion. They are, of course, places to live, to work, to visit, and I think most of all, to be happy. And in terms of a thematic and a domain that it's very close to me because I worked 4.5 years in terms of regional development. I consider cities as core instance of territorial development. And this is quite important because we see cities, we tend to see cities as an island, as a standalone entity, but they are cores in terms of a broad territory, and the development to this territory needs to be articulated between cities and between the multi-level governance instance of administration, both centralized states, both regional approaches, and of course the cities and the municipalities approach. And as a part of this evolutionary societal ecosystem, they play a key role and a key part of this evolution. So, Victor, could you please move to the second slide? Okay, so but the cities are facing a crossroad and facing a lot of challenges in terms of which way they should go forward, because transformation and the variables are so many, and at the same time that cities are in an evident crossroad. And the smart cities approach, the traditional, as I can say, traditional smart cities approach, basically focus on technology, they did not succeed. I think we are all know, and I think we all agree that a smart city focus on technology is not effective. So they need to creativity and innovation needs to be developed in a more tolerant and more open ecosystem, because that's the way it is. I think innovation it's an open process. It's not a closed process, and creativity is part of this innovation process. So they need to be developed and need to be fostered in a more tolerant and a more open ecosystem. Quality of life, well-being, health, safety, privacy, topics that Victor mentioned before, are now the key indicators, the KPIs of the cities for the next years. As I mentioned before, in terms of this transformation process, we need to reflect about our governance model, and of course we need to adapt to the new times, of course, and to the new future. But the main topic is they need to be changed. They are not well responsive to this crisis as we are facing now, and of course they are very far from people, and they need to be more integrated in both vertical and horizontal ways. And when we are talking about sustainability, we need to have this integrated approach, both from environmental approach, social approach, and in these times of global crisis, I think we need to focus, to make a strong focus on the economic approach, because the crisis began with a virus, and the healthcare system was very affected, and our personal health was very affected. But the economic health is the next crisis. So if we don't focus in this sustainable ecosystem, and we don't give some importance to the economic pillar, we are going to have strong difficulties in the future. So they focus on economics and changing and take advantage of this opportunity to change the regulatory and legislative framework, which especially in Europe are very rigid. I think it's a huge opportunity to make things happen and to give the citizens the new opportunity to make their own smart city. So moving forward to the last slide, I think the topic that I want to address, to finally address and to remark in my presentation, I think this is the time to change the game. This is a game. We can call it our life a game, if you allow me. And as I see for the future cities, the vision for the future cities, they need to be smart. Of course, they need to be smart, but they need to be agile. And World Economic Forum published in September of 2018 a very interesting framework called Agile Cities, and the focus is the agility to adapt to change. And I think the future cities need to be agile, and this pandemic crisis shows us very well the need to be adaptive, and to be agile. And they need to be creative, healthy, and of course sustainable. But as I mentioned before, there's a need, there's a fundamental need to make an integrated model for governance and development. We cannot split them. Governance must be connected, must be integrated with development. And we most of the times see, as in not only in cities, but in countries, that the governance and the development models are disconnected, and they could not be and they need to be integrated in the future. So in cities as an ecosystem, I mentioned before that creativity and innovation needs an ecosystem to deploy. And of course, city is the natural ecosystem to make it happen. But everyone has a role to play. As in the ecosystem, it's a natural order, and in the city, we have a natural order where everyone has a role to play. So, but my last remark regarding this model, it's that cities cannot play this game alone. It's impossible to make development throughout the territory with a standalone approach. So they need to articulate between each other, and they need to scale up to a network of cities. Here, I live at Braga. It's a medium city in Portugal, and we have an example of a network of cities, of neighborhood cities, of 4 neighborhood cities that complies a territory around 600,000 inhabitants. And each city for its own could not play the important role of development of this territory. So they are articulating. And this is a very good example that I think it could be disseminated not only in Portugal, of course, but with many other countries and territories. So just to wrap up, cities and communities are the leaders and drivers for this change. I think we need to dare and change and play the game to build the future of our society. And I think a very, very good way to do it is join the Zoom Global Smart Cities and to become a cities game changer. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, and I'm really sorry for all this mess with the presentations. I thought I was sharing it, but anyway, I was clicking and moving to second slide, first slide. But I was seeing it is not possible to comply with your presentation. So basically, I think you sum up what is the adventure we are into right now. I believe this kind of gathering is important to focus on this message. It's not possible anymore to just focus on the technology approach, even though technology will be always part of the city, will be always part of our lives. But we need to be aware that we have to cross a lot of areas, a lot of sectors, and make them all talk with each other and become more agile and flexible for the future. So I'm going to try to put everything okay now for the next presentation. And just give me a small moment, not this one, because, okay, so now it's a complication with the PowerPoint. I need to go out. Let's see, okay, this is not smart at all, doing these things by myself. But anyway, we have to improve, otherwise. Okay. Wow, I miss my team. Team for the events actually is an amazing team from Salt and Pepper. I believe Antonio is with us this afternoon. Anyway, if you cannot be, big hug, you will see this later. We definitely need to get back to the physical events, even though this part of the virtual and digital gatherings is important also, because it's easier for people to get access to the content, and the content keeps rolling and keeps playing. So let's go to our next speaker, and as you can see, is Joe Dignan. He's founder of an independent consultancy. It's called King Techi Limited, and he's focused on delivering digital transformation at local, regional, and the national levels. In addition to speaking, chairing, and writing on smart cities, he's doing this for a long time. Previous long-term engagements have included delivering the Gigabit Bristol program, head of business development for the Future Cities Catapult in the UK. He's also on the World Bank Smart City Expert Framework, the EU-China Smart City Expert Group, the Global Advisory Board for Participatory Cities, PwC India Global Smart City Expert Network, and chair of City Zenith Strategic Advisory Council. He's a senior research fellow at the Cluster for Sustainable Cities and a visiting program director and the non-executive director. And at the top of all this, Joe is also our co-founder of our association, and we are proud to have him here together with us. And Joe, please go ahead. The virtual stage is yours.
Right, let's get straight into it. Thank you very much indeed, Carlos, for a lovely introduction to the context of this, and also to Vitor, as usual, for a marvelous introduction. I actually was very impressed with myself, the way you introduced me. I quite like it, really. So I love this. I really did love the question that Vitor gave me. I've been involved in this for close on 10 years, and the idea of smart cities, are we there yet? Reminded me of my children in the back of the car going, are we there yet? Are we there yet? And the answer is always going to be, we'll get there when we get there. And so we're not there. I haven't been there for a while, but I'd like to actually take you through where I think we're maturing into, and also bring up a few areas that I think are very interesting as part of that maturing as to what the smart city concept is going to be.
Okay.
Good. You're there. Okay,
yep.
Excellent. Right, so we're not there yet. As I said, the smart city tag is always problematic. It's just a sort of marketing tag that we use for this type of activity, but it seems to be developing into, or maturing into, advanced urban digital transformation. So cities, regions, communities, and even all the way up to countries. So it's getting big all the time. What I think we're actually getting into, we are now at the point of, we have IoT platforms. So the price per unit of sensors has gone down. We're actually creating the platforms as the infrastructure is refreshed across the piece. We're actually creating a lot of data. So we actually had the IoT platforms, or we're getting them, and we are producing the data. The next stage that we actually need are data exchanges or data trusts, where you can actually synthesize that data outside of point solutions around air or energy or utilities. So you actually start getting more of a narrative and a story that allows you to make much more informed decisions about what you're doing. Digital twins are allowing us to visualize this data in real time and allowing us to do sort of scenario planning, whether it's across buildings, cities, areas, new developments, etc. And also there is a move towards the creation of new ROI models that allow us to prove what we're doing is actually effective. I mean, the big issue is the fact that we're using historic types of ROI models around internal rate of return or net present value or cost benefit analysis. But what the hell does that tell you about happiness or harmony or well-being or health or mobility on demand? Nothing. So we need to create new ROI models. So that's where I think we are currently. And what we really need, and we have needed for a long time, is some sort of burning platform, some sort of big issue that we can actually say, this is where we're kind of heading. And so the one I think actually works is climate change. I'm not going to read that bit on the right, but what it basically says is that cities are the worst polluters for the smallest number, percentage of the world. And if we want to tackle climate change at all, it's not across large swathes of the world. If we actually manage to tackle it at a city level, we're going to have an absolutely massive effect. They only operate, I mean, cities only cover 3% of the world's land mass, and yet, as it says there, it takes up 40%, 40% of GHG emissions, global water supply, energy, etc. If we actually take at one end, this is what we're trying to do, and then work backwards from that, if we can sort of roll in things like the SDGs around this, like SDG 11, etc., we've got something that we can say we're actually working toward. And also you can start looking at how this leverages a lot of institutional funding, because my experience of places like the World Bank or the European Commission or the Asian Development Bank, etc., is they've got lots of money, lots of ideas, but they don't really have any cohesive message as to why they're spending their money. So I think climate change could be the one we're looking at as going to be something useful. This is so much more problematic because I spend a lot of time talking at events and stuff. And I've always been aware that, data is data. It's just bits and bytes. It's nothing. So you've got to convert it into information. But usually we convert it into information around single point solutions, such as water or air pollution or energy usage or something. We need to create data deltas where we combine that information with other data to synthesize it into something that gives us more of a narrative around what it is we're attempting to do. You're probably all aware that the Toronto Alphabet big development around smart cities collapsed over the fact that they could not agree how to actually gather the data and use the data. I come across people saying we're doing this all the time, but when you kick the tires, as we say in the UK, they're not. It's a very problematic area, and really on top of that, you really got to fit data ethics as well, which is a completely nascent type of approach that we have. Just that simple schematic I put up there was produced through the Data Pitch organization. I've started working with one of the professors at the King's College London who put it together to create, well, how does this actually work? One of the things that I have been doing in the past was I was the special advisor for the island of Jersey around digital transformation. And we were looking at how Jersey could potentially become a global data exchange, because they have the ability to create the governance and the legislation that allows you to say, okay, this is how we keep this data safe. This is what the governance behind it is. This is how we keep the privacy piece, but this is how we release it. So this is missing. Unless anybody on this call tells me they know somewhere where it's working, I'd love to find it out somewhere where it's working. There's some private companies such as Ocean Protocol that have started to work on this. And you've got places like the Open Data Institute that are trying to do this. There are a lot of people trying to do it, but I haven't seen it working. So unless we can get this in place, we're still going to have a massive barrier going forward. The second thing is something I've been involved in a lot, which is the digital twinning piece. So digital twins came out of the architectural engineering construction companies. And it sort of evolved out of building information management and building information modeling. And it's just basically a virtual representation of a physical thing. But we can now feed real-time information into these buildings. Due declaration of interest, I sit on the board of one of the most effective companies in this area called City Zenith. And we had a white paper on how digital twins can be used post-pandemic for opening up buildings and allowing people to move through buildings and in buildings, etc. This is happening. So this is a good thing. It's happening. So we've got the IoT platforms happening. We've got the digital twinning happening. And on the right here was something that was produced by a company called Urban Economic, which looks at, these are the cost savings. If you're actually going to try and do anything, as you well know, everybody on this call, you've got to be able to point to, is this going to improve efficiency? Is this going to make services better? Is this going to take out costs? And we're telling stories without actually having the backup. And so this is just an example, and it's not real information in there. It's just an example of what potentially could happen when you're looking at digital twins to build the business case to have the digital twins. Everybody okay? Still worthy? Okay then. So the new ROI models piece, I mean, there's something that comes out of the Stockholm guys around the fact that you can actually, if you do this, you're going to get this, which I always like. And the return on the investment models, I mentioned it earlier, but it's it's so massively important and seems to be so massively ignored that, okay, why are we doing this? Are we why are we doing this? It's like, it's almost like a product-led approach. We've got this technology, so we'll put the technology in, and it's like, so what? What are people doing differently? How do we measure what people are doing differently? And then how we monetize what people are, or the difference in what people are doing, so that we can actually prove that there is a case for investing in this, and equally a case for continuous investment thereafter. I mean, I think we're no doubt all aware of the number of sort of pilotitis you get from all the different places. You get 2 years funding, 3 years funding, and then it falls flat in its face. It falls flat in its face because no one's actually been able to prove why it works or how it works. So I've been working very closely with this group from Urban Economic to try and create new ROI models that you can use in this space to prove what success looks like. So that's my rundown on what's actually happened to maturity. I've got 2 more slides because I was going to ask, well, how do you do it? So this is my incredibly short four-point concept of how do you do it. First is you've got to create a group that can deal with these wicked problems. And this group that you create has got to actually have the skills to be able to think differently across lots of different areas. I think as Carlos was mentioning earlier, this was initially very much a technology play. And it still is a technology play. But if you talk to an energy company, it's all about energy. If you talk to a utility company, it's all about utilities. You talk to a finance company, it's all about back office treasury functions. If you talk to the government, it's all about service delivery. It's all of those things at the same time. So you need to create the right team. You have to show through use cases what people would do differently if the investment was made. So find out what people do now. Try and work out what would happen if people did things differently, and then work out what's the technology you need that facilitates people doing things differently. Then how do you measure that difference? And then that allows you to reinvest. It sounds simple, obviously. It is incredibly complex, obviously. But unless you do it this way, we're still going to have this muggly thing that we've been doing for 10 years, which is not working. Hasn't worked. See, I'm getting very excited here. The next bit is, I always bring this up, and I use it pretty much in every presentation I ever give, because after spending 10 years closely involved in this arena, this is what works. And if you don't have this, it's very likely it's not going to work. In fact, I would go further and say it's not going to work. So the first is, find a focused maverick to lead it. And I originally used to have leadership up there, but then I reckoned that, well, I understood that you can get really competent leaders who will competently lead you the way you've always done things. So, and they're good leaders, but they're only good leaders in doing what you've already done. You need something of a focused maverick, and the focus bit is important. So you don't just want a maverick, you want the focused maverick who will take risks, will try something different, will have a shot. You think of the guy who set up Singapore originally. Yeah, he was a focused maverick. Sheikh Mohammed out in Dubai, he's a focused maverick. You need a focused maverick to be able to lead this. It's best if you get some sort of one in the executive, but also it's quite good if you actually have someone on the political side as well. If you get the politics and the executive delivery piece together, then you really start motoring. You got to create a dedicated team. Too much of what I see are people who do the smart bit as part of what they already do in their red jobs. So you'll meet the director of transport or the director of economic development or whatever, and they have smart as part of their portfolio, but they don't focus on it. You need to create a dedicated team that actually, this is what they do. You got to follow the money. I'm one of the few people I think that actually ever put together a follow the money report. And I looked at the top 7 international financial institutions and what they were spending money on. And this is actually about 18 months, 2 years out of date. But at that point, there was only $128 million being spent on things called smart cities, which kind of worked with what I've seen that comes out from RFIs, etc. But if you start looking at what they're spending their money on, they're just using words that the nomenclature that is out of date. So they talk about e-procurement, e-government, e-health, e-transport, anything with an E in front of it is basically digital transformation. So once you put that back in the pot, there's over 14 billion available to spend. So money is not the problem. It's good ideas, good leadership, and follow through, and proving the ROI that's the problem. You've got to benchmark what you have. That's just, it's common sense. Create the underlying infrastructure, by which I mean, I spend a lot of time talking, and if you talk to IT conferences or whatever, it's all about the infrastructure, it's all about the connectivity. If it's a sort of people-focused conference, it's all about people, but it's not a binary question. It's not just about people, it's not just about technology, it's about all of the above. Build a sense of common purpose. I usually relate to the fact that I'm Scottish and I come from Edinburgh, and we hate Glasgow, which is only 40 miles away. If you want to get anybody in Edinburgh to do anything, you tell them, if we do this, we can beat Glasgow. So most of the conversations you get on the circuit are all really about partnership and collaboration and being nice to each other and all this kind of stuff. What really actually makes things work is competition. So get that idea of competition, like Northern Portugal against Southern Portugal, that would work. You just got to think of the football teams. So, it's that idea of create a common purpose. Find a reason to be part of the future. So many places I come across, they actually have lost their way. So they were set up originally as trading posts or centers for academia or whatever it is, whatever you were set up to do in the first place. Work out what you're going to be doing in the 21st century onwards. And then I can build that future. Leverage the private sector. This is something that really annoyed me because I moved from the public sector into working for Microsoft, and all of a sudden no one would talk to me. It's ridiculous to not leverage the private sector. You as a public sector person may have 3 data scientists. In the UK, Microsoft has 600. Use them. If you want to actually leverage the private sector, tell them what you're thinking of doing, because that's all they want to know is what sort of solutions that they need to build for the future that you may buy. That's it. That's all they want to do. So use that, use them, and you want them focusing on your problems. I mean, a couple of times I have public sector audiences and I say, and no one's making any money in this space. And you can see them all nodding and you're going, no, that's really a bad idea, because if they're not making any money in this space, they're going to go off and do something else. You want all that R&D they actually have directed towards the issues and challenges you have. And to do that in enlightened self-interest, you have to say, this is what we think we may be buying in the future, and they will invest in creating those solutions. Do something, that's another one. In other places that I come across that have huge, like 3-inch thick strategies where any number of moving parts must all work together for something to happen. And obviously nothing happens. You have to make it totally iterative. It has to be dynamic and try something. If it breaks, fails, try something else, and then start adding to it. So I think that this is a big reflection on what's happening in public sector procurement as well. The whole concept of large-scale RFI, public sector procurement, where they spend 2 years putting together an RFI, which is already out of date by the time they put it out, another year procuring it, another year mucking around, it's just not working. So challenge-based procurement is beginning to break into the scene. The idea being, you say, okay, we've got 50,000 quid, we'll stick it out as a call, we'll put it out also to our SME community, we will give 5 of them 10,000 each, we will take it to the next stage, we'll give 3 of them 20,000 each, we'll take it to the next stage, and we'll give the last one 100,000 to make them develop. That kind of challenge-based procurement process is beginning to come into public sector. Still not there quite yet, but it's getting there. And measure the difference. I keep hammering on about this ROI piece, but I mean, where else and in what other situation would you ever have the cheek to go up and someone say, give me 10 million to do this, without telling them how you're going to measure that? Massively important. Right. That's the end of my rant. I'm very happy to take questions. I'm very happy to move on.
Great, thank you, Joe. Can you, leave your comments, leave your contacts. Of course, we have your contacts also in our webpage, our website. I can mention the address is www.zgsc.pt. Okay, you can stop the sharing the screen now. I think it's up to you. Anyway, we are, because we have this, it's not going to be possible to have Nicholas Liu with us because no power in Nairobi, Kenya, with contingencies that happen often. Been discussing with him for a long time, and sometimes we have to reschedule meetings because there's no power, and that's really an issue. Actually, one of the problems that smart cities need to deal with, especially in cities so populated as Nairobi is, and all the other capitals in Africa, for example. So, Joe, we're going to do a slightly change here. We can to open Q&A for you and Carlos, of course, and we can stay some more minutes talking a little bit more about what you said, what you brought us, and it's very good to have a broad audience with us. More than 140 registered, but actually in Zoom, I scared them. I at least saying we have a few slots to get, to join all of them. But anyway, in the social media is being streaming online through a lot of our groups, web pages, Facebook pages, YouTube channel, and so on. So I can ask the audience if there's some questions for Carlos and Joe. If not, I can start with one really mean for Joe, because this is what we've been discussing for a long time and brought us to this association we created 2 years ago. is that why it's so hard to make things, as you mentioned in your last slide, is 10 years. That slide is for 10 years. You're going through the events, always finishing with that slide. And things don't seem not changing. At least don't change with that speed that actually everyone wants, but no one is able to achieve. So, Joe, what is your comment for this? Why we're not there yet?
I think the biggest issue, the biggest problem, the biggest barrier, wherever we want to call it, is who runs the smart city approach. 9 times out of 10, it's city hall of some description. So it's elected officials and unelected officials, and executives. And they have a 4-year mandate. 4 years does not work in this space. You can't do it. It's just impossible. I mean, it's just silly. So you get an administration that comes in and spends a year bedding in, spends 2 years doing something, and then it spends a year trying to get re-elected. So the biggest issue is who runs it. I think that that's been recognized by a number of both countries and cities. And so they're starting to create special purpose vehicles that sit just outside City Hall. It gives a number of things. One, it can have continuity between changes of the political area. The second is it can be slightly more agile in terms of the procurement process. The best examples I've seen in the world, I mean, if you take out places like Singapore, which are, people keep saying we do this in Singapore and Singapore does this. And I keep thinking, well, that's great, but I don't really care because we're not Singapore. We don't have a command and control infrastructure. We can't do this. It's the same when they say, well, we do this in Dubai, we do this in Qatar. It's the same thing. It's like, I don't care because we don't have that type of environment. That's not what Western democracy is all about. So Vienna is a very good example. So they've created something called TINA, T-I-N-A, and TINA sits outside of city government, and it acts like an all-seeing eye at Lord of the Rings. So it says to Mr. Transport, you can't do this, and this integrates with Mrs. Education over here, or something of that nature. That's good. You've got small ones that are beginning to think in that direction, like, was it Digital Porto Digital? That's the kind of organization that could take that kind of role. In the UK, I don't know how many people remember, I don't know how many people were in Barcelona in 2016 when they had the Smart City of the Year. And there was Moscow, Shanghai, Dubai, all the usual suspects. And the winner was Peterborough. And all you could see was 200 people go to Google Maps going, where the hell is Peterborough? Which is a small town in the UK. So this small town in the UK, it's a city, just about a city, north of London, near Cambridge. It won the Smart City of the Year in 2016 because they had created something called Opportunity Peterborough, which sat outside the council and did exactly what I've just said before. So you've got Bristol is open in the UK, you've got any number of cities looking in this direction. So that's a very long-winded way of saying the biggest issue is the continuity of effort that is necessary to actually get long-term benefits. I don't know about the other guys on the call, but I mean, I actually spend much less time talking with technology companies and much more time talking with architectural, engineering, construction companies, because their return on investment is 5, 8, 10, 15 years. So that fits with this space. And they can bring in utilities, telcos, systems integrators, as and when they're required to produce the right results. And this is where digital twinning is coming very strongly into the play. And I don't know if anyone's been to MIPIM. MIPIM in Cannes, M-I-P-I-M, MIPIM. It's basically the biggest developer conference in the world. You have 24,000 men, mainly men, in blue suits with expensive watches pitch up in Cannes around about March. And it's the biggest developer conference. But now it's the biggest smart city conference, because you get the developers, the architectural, engineering, construction companies meet with the politicians and the cities in the same space. So you get governance, politics, money, all in the same space. That's where it's going. That's why I spend more time with architecture, engineering, construction companies than I do with technology companies. And I spend a lot of time working with private sector companies and advising them on how to get into the market. And I usually tell them, forget cities, because it sucks as a market. But there are areas in cities. There are, port developments, there are universities, there are campuses, there are railway stations, there are universities, there are airports where you can put all what we're talking about into where there is actually a customer. Sorry, I'll shut up now, but I can go on about this for hours, but that's where the market is, and that's where we can prove what we're doing is correct. And that's why I mentioned earlier, I got interested in islands. And you remember we went to Funchal, we went to Madeira. Those are fantastic examples of where you can prove all this activity in an area that is smaller than a country or a city, but has everything, all the same challenges. So the smart islands piece is taking off dramatically around the world, which is why I got involved in Jersey in the first place. Places like Malta were doing very well until the mafia took over and everything went wrong. But Jersey is not like Malta, but neither is Madeira. So islands are incredibly good exemplars of what we can do.
Joe, before we step into the islands, I want to stop a little bit in that what you said about Cannes and the MIPIM conference, because actually we did it 2 years ago in 2018. It was already establishment that Zoom Smart Cities has been always in pioneering the event. So basically we brought blockchain to the conference. Everyone is talking blockchain, and we brought the housing and affordable housing also for the conference. And at that time, JLL, CBRE were and the others like the Max and Era, they were not even close to that moment. But after you mentioned that it was exactly in that year, and in that year in MIPIM, our conference was in June, and the MIPIM was, I believe, was after this one. It became a huge step forward to that what is I believe what you mean, private sector strength and the private sector, give power to the private sector to start building also. Because Carlos can also give his opinion about how hard it is to get financing for these projects. We hardly get money to pilots, and it's a lot of money already for pilots, more than it should, I believe. But I want to keep a little bit with you, Joe, for this part of the private sector, because it's something that is in our core of our association. Someone has to connect all the dots until everyone starts talking at the same language. When you have the other, you're already talking with the architects, with the developers, with the project managers, and also with the ones who have responsibility to start procurement and the regulations. But actually, it's here that the most of the cases fail. I don't know if you agree. In the lack of vision to start new projects with the proper regulation to build a smart city with a public-private partnership, for example.
I think that I echo all your points. And I think 3 years ago, I think I was the only person talking about smart cities at MIPIM, and then next year I was in one of the tents, and then the year after that I was in the main concourse, and then all of a sudden everyone is talking about it. Nothing to do with me. It's the market is actually recognizing this is something they need to do. They need to bake it in at the master planning stage. But this is the beauty of it. It's because the actual city authorities, the regional authorities, or even the national authorities can mandate at the master planning stage what they want. So it's almost like planning game, you know. You will need to put this infrastructure in place before you get a chance of developing this, that, or the other. So there is a place for the government, there is a place for the developers, and as I said, the longer term. But also the fact is, once you've signed a contract, it doesn't matter about there's a change in the politics. The contract still stands. So it takes you past that 4-year electoral cycle piece tremendously well. I think it's where it's going. But you're right, about 3 or 4 years ago, there was this, within the AEC community, there was a sort of lip service to sustainability and good things and environment and stuff, but it was all kind of boutique-y. They didn't actually have any money. So they had no, and if you don't have money, you don't have any power. So they could advise internally within places like CBRE or ACOM or these sort of companies, Arup, but they didn't have any power. But now the power is coming from outside in terms of the pressure that is coming through from governments and City Hall. They're now putting into their RFIs, we want mini parks, we want mobility on demand, we want smart lights, we want, you know, all the stuff that we've been talking about for a long time. That's why it works. So those areas where I just find it very difficult to envisage a point where you're going to be able to get a city to do it led by the city. I can't see it myself. But what I do, I mean, just to go back to that whole point again, because we have to prove that it works. And where we can prove it works is look at university campuses, hospital complexes, airports, large stations, anywhere, or ports in particular. Ports are lovely. Anywhere where we can stick a periphery around what we're doing and then prove it works, that helps us build the ROI models that we can then take to the city authorities and say, let's try this at a bigger scale. But I mean, you have a lot of, just jumping again, I mean, I get approached by countries who are saying, you know, we're too small to really do this at city scale. Lebanon's one, it's only got 4.8 million people. Or even Holland. Holland's saying, okay, we've got 16 million people in Holland, so why are we doing it at a city level? We may as well do it at a national level. So it's moving forward as an idea. It's still never going to get there, but it's never going to get there anyway, because all we're doing is using the best technology we have, and that's going to be continuous. It's never going to be a point where you become smart and stop. It's a continuous development idea. But I think that if Zoom is involved in MIPIM is a place, when I get asked, where should we go? You know, should we be going to Barcelona, Fira, and all the rest of it? Yeah, go to Barcelona, Fira. You'll get some interesting stuff, but that isn't where it's happening. It's MIPIM where it's happening. It's with the developer community is where it's happening, because that's where money, governance, and longevity, and the right ROI models all come together.
It's a good insight, Joe. I want to ask more or less the same question. We have some questions in the chat. I'll go through it a little bit later because we still have some time to the Q&A. Until at least the next speaker comes inside. We just recruited some of the most busy people in the world, so we need to stick to the schedule and try to bring them on and wait until everyone is ready to join the party, the gathering. So, Carlos, I want to complete a little bit the vision of Joe. Especially in this part of that you are expert and you are involved into for a long time, which is the financing, how we pay, how cities can go to the financing path to get everything done. So we already know it's impossible to finance smart city deployment, full deployment. So what we are observing is that since some years from now, there will be financing and some European funds to specific pillars like energy, mobility, and some others to start some pilot projects. So do you agree that we were training all these years, like do a small heating session to what is the big business that we need to start promoting and working on?
Well, I basically agree with Joe, because we are dealing with a very complex process. It's not about technology, as Joe mentioned before. He's now talking more with architects and engineers and construction companies. I think it's the right way to do it, because they are the builders of the city. Since the ages, cities were built by these types of persons and entities, because architects, engineers, construction companies, investors, they are the builders of the cities, the ancient cities and the actual cities. So I think the focus should be on that. But the main issue, in my perspective, is how to combine public and private money, public and private funds, in an integrated and an oriented way. I think we, in Portugal and in many other countries, we have the public-private partnership, the PPP, but we don't apply it well. We don't apply it well because there are unbalanced approaches, and at the end of the day, normally the public funds are financing everything, and the revenue normally goes to the private sector. It's not that way to be. But I strongly agree, and I strongly believe that we need to move forward to a PPP model, a sustainable PPP model, because if we combine the public interests, of course they are the city council and city hall as the politics as at least a four-term mandate to deploy their politics, because they were elected, so they are chosen by the people, and this is a very strong mandate, of course, but they don't have the resources. They need to gather private sector and ONGs and so on, to combine them in what I call the ecosystem. This is what I call the ecosystem: public sector, private sector, social sector, communities, citizens. But there's, as Joe said before, and I agree, I strongly agree with him, we need to have an economic model, a sustainable economic model. Otherwise, no one will invest. Not only the private, but basically the public funds are more difficult to address, and they need to have a strategy. Well, Joe said there's a lot of master plans and strategies to do everything, and at the end of the day, nothing happens. But to apply to these public funds, normally national or European funds, you need to have a master plan. You need to have strategies, but only with public funds you cannot deploy them. So you need to combine with other types of funds, and this requires ROI model, and requires, of course, new forms to attract the private sector to this equation. And I think it's a very good time to start it, because as we mentioned in our both presentations, the technology approach, basically only the technology approach, is not effective, and cities need a lot of investment to deploy a smart city strategy. I think the concept of the living labs, the concept of making small interventions, rather in a university campus or in a port or in a railway station, or well, in a district, it could be very, very effective, because we can confine the domain, the scope of the intervention, and establish all the KPIs, establish all the models, the economic models and the technology models as well. And afterwards, we have some results to show, and especially we have some results to convince the city council decision makers to that's a good way of doing things. And with a lot of transparency, I think, as you mentioned, Victor, before in your introduction, transparency and ethics, they are two values very, very important in this process, because of course it's all about citizens, it's all about cities, but at the end of the day we need to be accountable, and we need to show to our not only to the taxpayers but to the citizens that all the things we are doing, it's for their own good, it's for the best of it's for always for the common interest, and that's very important in terms of accountability for the cities.
Thank you, Carlos. I'll go back to Joe before the questions from the audience, and you can post it in our chat, or open your microphone and introduce yourself. But Joe, I want to continue a little bit more in this path, this yellow brick road that we need to start walking. So people understands that, or at least believes, have some belief that the smart city is something very expensive to complete or to start, and sometimes they don't have the impulse or the inspiration or even the will to. I'm talking about the public administration, for example. Most of the times they wait too much until they start walking the path or try to do something. So basically, I choose this metaphor from Roi of Happiness because it's like the story. People are smart already, and they don't need like a label or a pin to tell them that they become smart city. Sometimes they are smart and they're doing things and solving problems and overcoming challenges with very little and very little resources, and that's probably what makes them so smart and an example to others. So my question is, I have two questions in one in this moment, and you can mix them together because I think they are related. First is that probably we don't need to spend millions and millions and millions from public money to initiate the process of a smart city. And the second part is that this is not exclusive from the public administration or the public of the city, of the government of the cities. So there are a lot of around the world examples of private that start building their own cities. And I mentioned one example in Brazil that I know. Basically, are resorts. They are like big villages or small towns, but they already have all the aspects of a smart city. What is your comment on these topics?
I would love to sit down with a bottle of wine with you and talk about this, because it's seriously, everyone talks about smart cities as if it's like one market, and obviously it's lots and lots of different markets. So there's a developing world market, there's a developed world market, there's areas within cities, there's industry-specific type activities going on. So it's not just one market; it's lots and lots of different markets. I think that some of the best examples I've seen goes back to citizen engagement. So actually, no, I'm going to pull on one back, because I used to be a head of economic development for local authorities, right? And just as an example, back before the austerity kicked in, I had 120 staff working in one region up in the north of Scotland. I went to see the same local authority, they had 30 staff working, doing the same amount of work. So the capacity within government, local authorities is not there anymore. Plus the actual industry-specific knowledge is not there anymore. Even when I worked for the city of Bristol, which was one of the top ones in the UK, my legal expertise, so my legal advice only worked 2 days a week. So if I missed her by Tuesday evening, I had another week before I could actually talk to her again. This is a long-winded way of saying the capacity within local authorities and cities is not there. So you have to give them as much support as possible to be able to develop this. One of the things that we developed were things called city academies. The City Academy was just about everybody developing a smart city approach. You know, they start with smart parking. We want smart parking. We need sensor parking. And you're thinking, no, you don't. What you want is no cars. But it's what they start with because that's what other people are doing, and they start with the simplest thing. They have no idea of what is possible. So we created the city academies to take city officials through what is the best we've seen around the world, just to raise aspirations and expectations. That helped quite considerably. I mean, you had Jim Knowles from Belfast on not long ago. And, you know, we kicked out life.
Our co-founder.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kicked off the discussion in Belfast about 5 years ago. And we did take Belfast through things like the City Academy to show them what was possible. And on the back of that, Belfast is really doing incredibly well and is incredibly innovative. But you actually have got to understand what is possible, and most local authorities don't. Also, so one, there's not the capacity in local authorities to be able to deal with this. Two, they don't know what's possible, and therefore they always start with the basic common denominator, like parking. So you have to take them through a process of understanding what is possible and what they could aspire to, and then also start looking at the funding. There's an organization in the UK, one of the best I've seen it at this example, called Participatory Cities. You should have a look at it. So Participatory Cities was set up as an umbrella group for citizen engagement in smart cities in a very low performing London borough called Barking and Dagenham. So Barking and Dagenham was one of the most unsexy boroughs in London. Still is, but they came up with this participatory cities. The local authority put 2 million in, and on the back of that, the people running it managed to go to places like the Roundtree Trust, Wolfenden Trust, Camelot, the Lottery Fund, and they managed to bring in another 8 million. But I love their basic principle. The basic principle was that there are many groups, local groups, that just didn't know how to form organizations. They didn't know about fiduciary duties. They were worried about insurance and forming companies. So they just didn't start doing anything. So they act as an umbrella organization. And if they agree that this group, wherever they are, and they're doing is correct, they come under their umbrella. So they take care of all the administration in terms of insurance, fiduciary duties, directors, memorandums of understanding, all that kind of stuff. That works really well. It's very effective. So I always say that money is not a big problem. It really isn't. Money is certainly, if you can prove the ROI on it, money is definitely not a problem. But it goes back to proving an ROI. Now that ROI it's that, how do you prove the ROI of happiness? Don't know, but people are working on it. There was in Colombia, the mayor, who was doing some good stuff before he got outed, he actually came up with the first monetized happiness quotient I've ever come across, which was they were trying to work out where to site factories, and obviously they were going to be outside of the city. So he was trying to work out, say you or I, if we were offered a job and it was an extra hour commute, how much was that worth to us? If I gave you an extra $10,000 a year, would you take that extra hour commute? So this is the sort of ways people are trying to put metrics around qualitative features such as happiness. So they came to the conclusion that $10,000 meant an hour on your travel to work journey. This kind of stuff is where it's going. And as I said, we need to be able to synthesize information that gives us more of a narrative than we do at the moment. I mean, I can find all sorts of information on things like air quality. And air quality, used to be a nice to have. It used to be, okay, air quality was sort of environmental sustainability thing, but in fact, it's no longer just that. So for example, FDI, foreign direct investment metrics. Air quality now is on foreign direct investment metrics. Because if I move my company to Athens and somebody gets sick because of the air pollution, I'm liable. So all of a sudden, air quality starts becoming a hard metric for foreign direct investment, not just a nice to have. It's that kind of direction of travel. I mean, we're still not there yet, but it's the way we're going. I still think the biggest barriers are the ability to create data trusts and actually have the governance and procedures behind it that allows you to be happy about what's happening with it. I mean, there's a development in Holland called Brainport. You should look it up because I think it's really excellent. And apart from the usual sort of sustainability and brilliance of the Dutch way of thinking about how you live, they are creating a data trust so that individuals can monetize their own data. I got very excited when I read about this and got in touch with them, but found out they hadn't done it. That's something they're kind of aspiring to. A lot of people are aspiring to. That whole concept of how do you monetize data in a way that actually benefits both the individual and whatever the company is. But it is what people are conjuring with currently. I said if you go and have a look at Digital Jersey, because in Digital Jersey, guys I've been working with, they've actually created every home in the whole island has fiber. So there's gigabit, even the 15th century castle has fiber. We've created a platform across the whole island for sensor technologies. That feeds into a digital twin of the whole island. If you want to make a planning application on Jersey now, you've got to submit the planning application in 3D because it drops into the model. Some of the legislation they're coming out with, you cannot build anything new on Jersey without electric car charging point. It's that kind of stuff that's really, beginning to have an effect. That's why I think we need more exemplars of this type of activity before you can go into somewhere like Lisbon or Porto and say, this is what you could do across the whole piece. And we can prove it, and we can prove what the return on the investment is. I sound like a banker, but I'm not a banker. It's just the fact I can't believe anybody pays any attention to anybody, especially when you're asking them for money to do something, unless you can actually prove what comes out the other end. Stop.
This just sending a message to see how we are at the time. So going through the questions, we already saw Marianne Batista asks, we already saw that our cities are not sustainable. If the major pollution comes from cities, and cities are where the majority of the population live, how do you see the future of the planet and the deal with the climate change if cities are the biggest resources consumers? She adds, maybe you can speak about regeneration of the forests and about food production that is closer to the consumer. How do you see that? It's for both Carlos and Joe. You can start, Joe.
Thanks for that hospital pass question. I think one of the things I found through this whole kind of COVID pandemic thing, it was a real eye-opener to me. I don't know what it was like in Athens or Portugal or anywhere else, but all of a sudden I can see the stars. I can actually, the speed at which the pollution has disappeared, or not disappeared, but has been ameliorated, is stunning. Within weeks, our air quality was better. I don't think that there is, I'm hoping, that's a hope. Hope is never a plan, but it is an aspiration. I don't think anybody is interested in going back to what we were before in terms of both transport, air pollution, the way people work. So I think that whole concept of, don't waste a crisis, I think that most of the thinking is now, okay, how do we not return to the normal state? And I think there is a chance that we have an opportunity of doing something in the short term that we would not have had before the pandemic. So it's almost like the question of to St. Paul, you know, of the poor. The poor will always, and his answer was, the poor will always be with us. We will always have the difficulty of actually ameliorating climate change. But I think that we've had such a shock to the system, and we're absolutely so surprised by the results of that shock, that I think there's a real opportunity now to do something about it.
The next question is in 2015, and the last one we close this Q&A from Antonio Ferreira. In 2015, according to World Charter for the Rights to the City, world's urbanization rate will reach 65%. The reconfiguration of cities will need to include an ethic, environmental, that allow to ecologize the cities. How integrate that in your model? I will add to this that also because of COVID-19, I believe a lot of people are thinking twice before moving to a big city again. I think this was something that we need to be aware of. Joe?
Just a brief remark for these two questions. I think we have now an opportunity to look and to reflect about what we call the metabolism of the city, because city as an analogy with a life being. And of course, we have a lot of flux of flows of materials, people, mobility, pollution, and so on. And this pandemic crisis shows us that we can do things differently. And I think we need to revisit this metabolism, this city metabolism, and highlight the topics that we could do for the future in a different way. I think mobility is a huge opportunity to do things differently. But as Margarita said before, I think that the local markets and the produce local and consume local, I think we could return to that basics. Because mass consumption and mass production makes a lot of impact in the environments, and climate change is not gone away. They are a little bit mitigated, but they are present, and we need to learn with this experience, this traumatic experience, and do things differently for the future.
Okay, Joe, your last thoughts, and I promise next time will be with a bottle of wine. So less sentence for the Q&A.
Yeah, well, it's Friday afternoon. I'm Scottish, so I'm getting thirsty. I just hope, and I said hope is not a plan, but I definitely think people have had it. Sorry, am I muted? Yeah. Generally, people have had a fright, and they've seen streets clear of cars. They've seen the air above them better. They have started walking. So, the best we can get out of this pandemic is we've had a shock to the system, a global shock to the system, which has actually highlighted that it is possible to do things differently. And I just hope that people will keep that going. I think when I talk to some of the local authorities I know, they don't want to open the streets again. They don't want to open the cars again. And in fact, when I'm talking with you, I haven't been into London for 3 months, which is just weird. But I have no interest in going back in. So someone would have to force me to go back in, usually somebody with a bottle of wine in a good restaurant. But I have changed. I have no great interest in, well, I'm havering here. I just hope that people have had enough of a shock to make a difference. That's it.
Thank you so much, Joe. You keep with us as long as you can, because the next speaker is also amazing example of resilience. And I believe he's already online with us. And I'm going to introduce Tim Vieira. He's CEO of Special Edition Africa and Brave Generation Europe. Tim studied business management administration at the University of South Africa, during which he started his own business, a craft brewery, in 1993, and subsequently interrupted his studies. He attended the executive program in Chicago Blues School in London, in Angola, together with his business partner. And they built one of the most relevant media groups, employing about 400 people spread around an advertising agency, events, outdoor advertising, printing, brand activation, media planning companies, and also has media business in Mozambique and Ghana. In 2015, he became known to the Portuguese public after being one of the investors in the first session of the television program Shark Tank Portugal. So he's currently the CEO of Brave Generation in Europe, and has other investments in Portugal in agriculture, services, information technology, human resources, cinema production, real estate, and tourism. He became president of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Luso, South African, and an advisory board member of Nova University School of Business and Economics. He is also the founder of Escolhe Portugal, founder and president of Be Brave, an association that promotes and assists entrepreneurship with a vast contact of networking and mentors. And Tim, the last not least, has traveled with his family extensively, with the last few trips being around the world in 118 days, 118 days, I'm sorry. He has done a transatlantic crossing with 2 friends on a sailboat, and he loves sport, and he's also an honorary member of SA Rugby Legend. I believe Tim is already with us, and of course, I keep the last one to the last part of his background, his curriculum, as like the newest member, especially Zoom Global. Tim, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. But we cannot see you.
I'm here.
Yes. Okay. Now it's good.
Can you see me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. That was all post-corona. So half of that's going to disappear now. Many of those businesses won't last. Many of them will disappear, you know, just like memories. It's unbelievable. But I was listening to Joe, and I loved it because of that Scottish accent. And I'm happy that he's going to go have a drink. I love the Scottish accent. Obviously, my best friend is Scottish, Lorne Douglas King. So it was good to hear the accent there. Yeah, so I came in now the last few minutes, and I was listening, and of course, the world has changed. Things are no longer what they were. But more importantly, now it's thinking about the future. And the future, definitely, we're going to have to forget all those future memories, which were all these memories that we were going to do, and we're going to travel, we're going to spend time with. All of a sudden, that's all changed. So we're busy creating new memories. Another great thing is that we can also get comfortable that we can't control anything. So get comfortable with that, because that's the new reality. And we've also understood that, you know, it's COVID today and it's gone tomorrow, and then it's Black Lives Matter, and then it's going to be the next crisis and the next crisis, which is also quite unfortunate, because I remember in 2007, I was told that, you know what, this crisis you're going through is probably once in a lifetime. So at least you're going through it now, and it'll be fine. The truth is that it wasn't once in a lifetime, because we're having another one now, which is once in a lifetime, and I'm not sure if this one's going to be once in a lifetime either. So this is the world we're in. Things change, and now I really feel like it's time that we actually start changing cities for the future we want. Okay, because it's all very nice to hear that the future is going to be better. We've learned so much. We're never going to be the same again. But now let's make that happen, because if we don't, you know, we are creatures of habit, and we sort of go back and start doing the same things again, and etc., etc. And we won't have that world we're trying to get to, especially after suffering the way we're suffering and then not getting anything back for this will be super, super sad. And especially myself, I got kids, I got 3 kids. I definitely want to make sure that they get a world that's a little bit better than the world I think I've got, although I've always thought I'm in an amazing world, you know. I've been always one of those people that I go back and let's go back in cities, and cities didn't have sewage, and then they got sewage, and we sort of had like 20 years extra on our lifespan. And then we didn't have healthcare, and our cities started to have healthcare, and we went another 10 years, etc., etc. So I think we've had a good run, okay, but the run was running super thin. And I say that because I look at the US, and finally we were starting to get the life expectancy curve was getting to an end when we've got all this technology to make it go longer. We were getting to the US for the last 2 years where it went downwards. Okay, so it actually wasn't getting better. And that was scary. And then I think of it often, I think, how do we make this life better? How do we make our cities better? You know, a lot of us now, we're going to definitely have to make cities better because many people probably won't want to live in a city. They're going to look at moving out, going into the countryside, getting out of the cities because now we've got nomads, we can work anywhere. So cities are definitely going to have to get their act together and do stuff.
We lost momentaneously the contact with Tim.
What is the thing? It's vision and leadership. Am I back? Am I back? Hello?
Yes, you're back, Tim.
I'm back. Okay. Sorry, I was saying, just like any startup, the most important thing we always need when we're looking at any successful startup is, do we have a leader that can deliver? Do we have a team that can deliver? Do we have a product that will become sustainable, even if not immediately, but will it be sustainable? And this is where I see cities at the moment. I see cities at the moment where we're going to have to decide that we need new kinds of leadership. All right, and you know, and I don't even want to get into countries. Let's just call it cities. Need new leadership, but we definitely need new leadership. And when we look at what's going on, we can't afford to hit the next crisis with the same leadership once more. And that I say that because I'm not confident with how things have been handled and how we sort of see things happening. Sometimes I don't feel like it's transparent enough. There's not enough empathy. There's so many things lacking, which are basic leadership. Okay. And when I've worked with startups and they lack those things, they never survive and they never have a future. So I really look at our cities this time and saying it's time for people that live in cities and that have a vision of what they want their city. They've got to become responsible themselves and start electing the leaders they want. And the best leaders they can get will be entrepreneurial leaders. Entrepreneurial leaders, not saying that they got to get people that have been successful in business, but entrepreneurial leaders that want to make things better, that understand what it is having a team, that understand what it is to build and not tear down, to expand, because the one thing we're going to need after this crisis is over is going to be jobs. Okay, and jobs are done by businesses, and mainly businesses that are less than 5 years old. In Portugal, I'll give you the example, 70% of jobs are 75% of jobs are small and medium-sized businesses that are quite young, that are actually employing the people. Okay, so we don't have luxuries anymore to look after, those old horses, those businesses that no longer are the future. We've got to bite the bullet and understand that lobbies no longer work for those kind of businesses. We've got to start to understand that the city of the future will start to value culture. Will start to people will want to be happy where they live. And if they're not, they will go to the provinces. They will go to the countryside, because they will have a choice now. they can work from there and not have to come into the city. So there's got to be real attraction. And it's always, the attractions are always back to why we first went to cities. Jobs, culture, okay? And obviously people, okay? Because it's very nice doing the Zoom, but I would rather be sitting with all this Carlos, Antonio, Margarida, Joe, and having a face-to-face and afterwards talking. And I believe we would get further and we would, have bonds created. So I think with cities, we're going to have to definitely uh, do what is human. The cities will have to concentrate on what is human, okay, to bring back humans to them, or they will lose them. Right. I also understand, with technology that we have nowadays, we're going to have to find technologies that will make transport free, for sure. Transport will become free. I don't look at my kids in owning cars. I'm a car fanatic, and now I'm starting to feel guilty that I'm a car fanatic. I don't know why I have cars, because we couldn't get to use them. We didn't need them, and all of a sudden, it's actually a problem. So yet again, and something we're not going to need. Energy will become sooner or later free. I don't know if I should say these things. I don't know if it's being recorded, but it will start becoming free. It'll become a commodity, just like Wi-Fi is free. And this is how things are moving towards. And cities will benefit from that first because of the infrastructure. And that's what will bring people back into the city. Will be that they will travel for free. They will have free energy. And you won't have that in the countryside because you can't. It's not economical. But in cities, you will start having this stuff happening. Okay. And you might have to watch an ad before you switch on your lights, or you might have to give some data. But at the moment, we're all willing to give data anyway, and we're getting very little for it sometimes. So there's going to be ways that things are going to turn totally. Okay. I also believe that within cities, we're going to have to embrace finally that automation, robots, AI is part of it. But we've got to be clever. If we are going to choose entrepreneurs to lead us, and we are going to choose people that are looking after humans to lead us, we're going to have to see, how can we make this truly work for the top to the bottom, which is very little. That we've got very little things that work right from the top, richest to the poorest. And I think that we finally might have something that will do that. And when we look at robots and we look at AI, and if we set these things up, and they are actually going to be the future taxpayers, will be a robot that will produce and pay tax. Okay. And I know I've been drinking, so it might be a bit scary, but just stick to what I'm saying here. But, we are going to hopefully start living longer, and hopefully most people after this corona will want to stop working earlier and not think like they've got to work until they're 80 to survive. And at the moment, the way it seems like we've got to work longer and longer and longer, because Social Security might not look after us. Private healthcare is getting more expensive, etc. So our only hope is that we find someone that will work for us, pay the taxes, and then doesn't use those taxes. And fortunately, a robot or technology doesn't need to go to a doctor, doesn't need education, doesn't need to suck what it pays. All right. So if I've still got you here, I'm probably going to lose a few people here, but if I've still got you here, this is what we've got to start thinking. And these are going to be the cities that will start becoming attractive, because it will give us time to work on the skills we want to do the jobs that are human. It will give us a time to write books, paint, all the stuff that was beautiful when we first came to cities, when you used to see music being played. Last year, I traveled with a family, like Vitor was saying, and in Russia, you still have people playing instruments in the subways, and people listening, which is also different, because we do have people sometimes. New York, you see it, but everyone walks past, throws a coin, but keeps walking. In Russia, they were there listening. people painting views, which was amazing. You understand what I'm saying? So little things like this, and you start thinking to yourself, you know what? This is probably the way we want the future to. This is the future I started looking at after during Corona. Is how do I do less but more of what I like? But how do we pay for that? All right. We're also going to have to get through this phase, and I call it the three-pronged phase. You know, there's three phases in life, and the three phases really are the first one, which is a need phase, where we need stuff. You know, we need to have money to eat, we need money to live, a place to live, we need to produce something. But then often if we are sort of successful and we get the need phase done, we sort of move into the greed phase. Okay. And that greed phase, the greed phase is where I see that the world is at a big problem, because it seems like too many people are stuck in this greed phase, and they stuck in this greed phase for a very long time, almost as if they will never die, and they're going to need a lot more things to keep living. So they keep hoarding and buying, and we see billionaires with $1 billion today, 3 billion tomorrow, 5 billion the next day, and now, you know, close to over 100 billion. And the greed phase is there. So I see it as a scary phase, that the whole world is moving towards a greed phase, and we've made the greed phase seem like normal. That's the normal side of it. And we're telling, you know, the Chinese want to get into this greed phase. The Brazilians will all the developing countries will get into the greed phase, because the developed world, the Europeans, the American, North Americans, we're in the greed phase, and we've made that this is what's good. This is the normal side. This is what's good. So instead of us lowering resources, we're telling everyone, come up to where we are, which we are already, you know, 5-6 times using more resources than anyone else. And we're telling them, come join us up here. It's awesome. It's not so awesome, guys. It's really not so awesome, because if we carry on with this greed phase and we keep extending it the way we are, there will be very little left if everyone else comes and joins us. So we are in a place where cities will have to understand how to lower resource use. 100%. We're going to have to know, you know, it's easy to say, let's recycle everything, but it's better if we don't need to buy as much ham as we do, or as much this as we do, etc., and lower that number. Because the only way we'll do this is if we do this successfully, we'll get into the last phase of life. And it's a phase that every time I tell youngsters about it, they don't understand it, because we only know about it when we get to our age, or some of us even later. And that's the freed stage. It's when we finally get free. So you go through this need, greed, and you get to this freed stage. And then all of a sudden you realize, I've got all this rubbish. I've got all these things. I've got to get rid of them. And if you die before you get rid of them, your kid putting it all on Amazon and getting rid of it, and it's a problem for him. And you built up all these resources that you don't know why you've got them all. And unfortunately, we still haven't got any app that allows you to take that up with you to heaven or hell, wherever we go. So it definitely stays here. I've seen this stuff. It stays here. So all of a sudden, how do we get into this freed stage earlier and start enjoying ourselves? And that's the most successful and happiest people I've seen are the guys who get to this freed stage and understand they're not taking anything with them. They don't need much to be happy, and they start enjoying the little things. The walking the dog, the spending time having a coffee, the watching the music, the looking at who's painting art or looking at the art. All of a sudden that comes and that becomes the freed state. And that's where we get the benefits of what we've done, the taxes we've paid, the taxes the robots will be paying, etc., etc., etc. And we've got to make this more attractive in life, the freed, than the greed. And success will have to be moved, and city success will have to be moved. And how do we get to freed earlier than you know, looking at how much GDP does a city produce? Might be better to see how much happiness does a city produce, how much free people are living in that city, because that will attract talent, that will bring people there. And the other great thing is, if talent comes through, investors will come through. If investors come through, jobs are created, more talent. And this is how the whole thing comes. But it's got to be lifestyle. once and for all, we've got to understand that lifestyle is going to start attracting the people. And nowadays, people can go anywhere. They can work from anywhere. It's going to get tough because we're going to have to pay all this money we're getting, which is something else that's really, makes, I'm not an economist. Where was all this money when we could have used it before the crisis and done so much good with that, and it wasn't there? But now that we're in this crisis, there's all this money again, and we can use it to fix problems. So, these are going to be the questions that we're going to have to get to with Freed. And if we get to this section where we've got these robots during the greed, we'll have more philosophers, we'll have more people thinking, we'll have better leaders that will be willing to lead. I think we can definitely have smarter cities, smarter people, because smarter people make smarter cities. And at the moment, we're a bunch of idiots. We are really, really a bunch of idiots. Where we look at the decisions we're making, how we look at the lack of common sense, how we believe and spend so much time on media, on social media, on news media, how we think we've got all this information, but then we actually can't do anything with it. We don't actually use it to do any good. We've just got all this information, but we don't actually know what to do with it. So it's time to get to the right point. And I think that's maybe a little bit about it. That I can tell you guys, I've made some notes here, but I think let's do some questions before I lose everyone. And then, I'm happy to try and answer some stuff as best as I can. But I do believe that cities need to be led by entrepreneurs, need to become smarter. And if we do that, we'll have success. Okay, let's go.
Tim, you touched a very interesting point, and I believe your amazing experience as an entrepreneur since young boy, and opening your own path for success also can be an example for not only for the ones who are running cities, but also the people who are trying to open new business and startups and creating this kind of business going on, and they have to be established in some place, which will be cities, or at least some areas, some community. So Jorge Massimo asks you how to convert political critical followers into entrepreneurs and visionaries. So this is a tricky question, because in some points of the world, these visionaries and entrepreneurs are also the politicians, but in other places, probably they won't be the same. What is your thoughts about this?
I actually don't think we've got many entrepreneur or visionary leaders at the moment, and it's probably because we didn't need them in the past. We didn't need them. We were comfortable. There was planning. We knew what we needed. We were, in a way, improving our lives. Things were getting better for some, not for all. There's obviously problems with income gaps and etc. And when we look at, sometimes we love to say everyone's employed, but what kind of job? So I think we've been comfortable, and maybe that's why we didn't have too many visionary or entrepreneurial leaders. I believe now it's got to change, because during crises, if you don't change, you don't improve, you actually get nothing out of it. And I don't believe this crisis is not over. Okay, I think it's going to get a bit tougher, and it's going to maybe take a little bit longer. And we are going to need visionary leaders. How we get them, it's going to be up to every individual person to take responsibility and to come out of here knowing what he wants from life. A lot of us forget about it. It's amazing, because we all have plans for our businesses, but we never have plans for us. But we all have business plans for our business for 3 years, and we know where our business wants to go, etc. But we actually always forget about our own plans. What do we want? And if we do start to go back on who we are and what we want, and normally it's done with us having some good values and understanding where we want to be, we will actually start electing leaders that can probably get us to where we want to go personally. But we haven't ever thought of that. So I think this crisis gave us that opportunity. I think we will start getting better leaders well, it's going to be tough to get worse. I don't want to be negative, but it's going to be tough to get leaders that are less inspiring or less divisive than what we have now at the moment. Okay, so it's going to be our youngsters, and our youngsters, I've got a lot of hope. All right, our youngsters, I've got hope because I look at them. They're into sharing economies. They're into giving. They're into trying to help others improve their lives. They're into saving the environment. There's a lot of good stuff that they are going through. So it's a different kind of a generation, and I believe these are this is our best hope at the moment. And I just hope we get out the way, just like every city needs to get out the way and let people work and not put up more difficulties. I hope we do that in the leaders that we could start electing. I hope we also don't expect to have perfect leaders, because it's always a great thing. We always say that we're not perfect, but then we expect everyone else to be perfect. So we're going to have to become, we're going to have to be easier to forgive, okay? But as long as we know that the leaders that we're going to start having are actually going towards the goals we want in life, I think it could be a lot more interesting going forward, okay? I think, I don't know if that helped the question, but yeah, hopefully that's the answer.
I have another one. We're going to through this directly, because with the virus, with the COVID-19, as you well mentioned, we are watching and observing a shift from. Do you get that experience also? Because I know you the people do know you. You have a lot of people knocking on your door, asking for advice, mentorship. Someone has an idea to start a business, a startup, a company. And do you have the feeling that people are changing the subject, or they are choosing other paths for starting business, or they are not thinking about that at all?
Yeah, I believe that people are changing. I believe our generation is changing because we've understood something, I think, during this crisis. We've understood that anxiety comes from having a lot to lose, okay? So if you have a lot to lose, and a lot to lose is material things, you have a lot of anxiety, okay? So all of a sudden you think, it's difficult to stay at home and be happy and enjoy your family when you have a lot of stuff to lose, and you have salaries to pay, and you have huge amounts of responsibility. And they say, relax and enjoy yourself. Don't worry, enjoy the time, and it'll be fine. It's not fine. You don't sleep at night. You've got salaries. You've got responsibilities. So obviously, a lot of people that have lost things are going to relook at how they rebuild their lives, and their lives might be a lot less motivated to be built on success measured on how many people they employ, what's their turnover, how many businesses they have, how big their house is, how many cars they have. So that's going to change, okay? And these people are also starting to want to change the way they tell their kids will come up, or they're starting to tell their kids, it's important to be happy in life. It's important to, and before we had been told by our parents, it's important to be successful while making money. When we grew up, it's important to have a degree that makes money, and the best degree is the one that makes the most money. And then, you actually, all this has happened, and you think, maybe it's not all about the money side of it, but maybe it's about how do I live a good life? And companies are looking at, do I just concentrate on profits, or do I concentrate on doing good? Because doing good translates into getting more clients, more followers, and becoming a stronger brand, becoming a love brand in a way. And being just a company that makes money can actually create hate, and can put me on a risk factor of losing clients. You understand? For the first time, I'm starting to see some people actually not as excited as they were about their own social media. And me personally, I'll probably not be doing social media in 6 months' time. I'll be off it. I'll probably just have a website that's there, and anyone who wants to know anything can go there, and I'll post whatever's interesting there. But I don't want to spend time looking at social media and trying to act happy when we all go through difficult periods and difficult times. And companies and people are going to change with this, okay? But I also did say we also all human, and humans are human. We creatures of habit. Will everything change? No. We always love to travel. So maybe what will come out of this is more people will travel. We've always wanted to learn new things. So maybe now when we travel, we'll learn something new. We'll learn something when we're in that new place. Or we might even go study in a country where we're learning a new language, because we can nowadays. Or I might go work in a place that I've always wanted to live, and now I've got a reason and I can do it, even though I'm working for someone else in another country. I can also now hire the best people from anywhere in the world, and they don't even have to come to my city. They can be where they are. So it has changed, and I think we've got an opportunity here to make a better world, a better cities by having happier people. Will be better cities in a way. Okay, so I think that's where we are at the moment.
Yeah, and I cannot miss the chance to feature your national initiative that goes a little bit to the work that you are supporting to cities, local business, producers. You launched recently with the pandemic the platform Escolhe Portugal, which means choose Portugal. So basically, you are promoting local products, which since some years until now, we were discussing this as a part of a smart city strategy to promote the local products, because we cannot understand how the tourism can be attractive, and we are promoting gastronomy, food, and then we go buy it from somewhere, some other place. So I believe with this movement you are launching. Can you talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, Escolhe Portugal is definitely not a nationalist movement. Okay, because we are trying to say Escolhe Portugal in a way that we know it's going to become tough, just like any business. We're trying to get people to choose Portugal for various reasons. One, obviously, for Portuguese people to support their product, travel in their country, unite small, medium, and big business, because it's the only way we're going to get out of this new crisis. But then we're going further than that, where we're saying choose Portugal to invest in, choose Portugal to come and live in, choose Portugal to come and retire, choose Portugal to come work in. Okay, and that's where I really am more excited. I really want to lobby for that. And where do I see us improving? I see us improving in many ways, because we can. At the moment, Portugal in ease of starting business is ranked number 39. So 39 is not anything to be proud of. So if we can get to the top 10 in doing business, then it's better. We will get more people choosing Portugal. We will get more money coming in, more talent coming in, and we will be better. And it's easier to get better when things are running. You understand? Also, it's a great country, because even for startups and so on, the burn rate is a lot lower. And if we get good leadership, which makes the burn rate lower by, you've got Cascais now giving free transport already. You've got many places starting to become more innovative on what they can offer. We will get better people and more talented people. And that's, what Portugal, we want to be a lobby towards telling government where we think. So we've got ambassadors, obviously some famous people as our ambassadors, and trying to get the word out. But we're doing an advisory board that also works together by coming up with solutions for government and saying, listen, if we can just do this, we will do more work. Because if we do more work, you get more taxes, we employ more people, you get more taxes, and your salary gets paid. Because in many countries at the moment, people forget that entrepreneurs pay salaries of the leaders, and the leaders should therefore listen and improve, because it makes sense. It's an ecosystem in the end, just like any business. So that's what we're trying to do. We've been super happy with it, because it's really a platform that welcomes everyone in. It's free. It doesn't charge anyone, and through an association, we're paying the salaries of the guys who run the sites and are getting legal advice and setting up the lobbying side of it and so on, because it needs to be done. Because if we don't, we're not going to compete. And and the worst thing would be if we drop from 39 to 40 or below. because the world is going to get competitive, and we've got to as fast as possible, take responsibility on becoming better. Okay.
It's great, Tim. Very good to hear from you. Speak for a while, and I really hope and wish the next meeting from Zoom Global Smart Cities will be in your garage with your amazing collection of nice cars and good atmosphere. And that's how you said we cannot. This is good. This is good. Digital and remote, but there's nothing like eye to eye and physical approach, I believe. But actually, we need to use the tools that they are available for us. So
it's an open invite whenever we can do a meeting out here, no problem. The beer is included for free, and it's not virtual, it's real. Okay.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, guys. Okay, have a great one.
Now we go to next speaker. And of course, need to do some check some details about her background. So Mei Wen, she's a mentor, venture capital and private equity venture catalyst active in the Nordics, Silicon Valley, Israel, and Greater China regions. Mei, she's graduated from Oxford, HBS, and NASA, Miss. By Scholar Guide. So she's a robotics engineer turned serial entrepreneur and impact investor. Frequent speaker, panelist in special tech, entrepreneurship, consciousness, and after board member advisor.
Did you hear my talk or no?
Stockholm.
Very done.
Sorry, I was going to disconnect the sound audio from some of the speakers. So she's returning. She's visiting lecturer on Stockholm School of Entrepreneurship, Island, Arbor Space, and Harvard Innovation Lab. Her philanthropic efforts have been in education, healthcare, and environment. Mei was a former military intelligence officer, sponsored export athlete, and expedition medic. She has competed in Simron World Championship, Swedish Ski Mountaineering National Championship, and placed top 20 in Ironman in her age group. And she has traveled extensively to over 120 countries around the world, having skied to both the North Pole and the South Pole, sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, and summited some of the highest mountains on 7 continents. She's also a certified glider pilot, skydiver, and speed flyer, and occasionally works as a model, stunt woman, and of course for fun. And I'm going to stop the sharing and give the virtual stage to Mei. Mei, I'm not sure if you can hear me. Turn on your microphone. And welcome to our Smart Cities 2020 gathering. It's a great pleasure and honor to have you here. And of course, you as a new member from Zoom Global Smart Cities, you will have the chance to talk a little bit about what is that importance of the spiritual and wellness for the cities nowadays, especially nowadays in this complicated moment.
Yes, thank you so much to have me here, and thanks for the wonderful introduction. And it's my pleasure to be here with you guys and talking about some of these close to my heart. Let me just get my presentation started, and let's see, here we go. All right, I think it's just a little bit slow. We are in the countryside with a slow internet connection. So today, Victor asked me to share a little bit about smart cities on the topic of health and spiritual well-being. And I think it's important for us to talking about health and spiritual well-being because that's a topic that has been reserved for special occasions, maybe for people who are spiritual, for people who are religious, going to churches. It's not something that we taking into maybe a board meeting or talking about it in a very technical context. However, I personally believe that's things that are interconnected, that cannot be separated from one another. So my intention with this is that for us and each of you guys to ask questions. And by the end of the presentation, I hope you have more questions than answers. So feel free to write in the chat box and anything that you want to hear more about, the things that you're wondering. And I'll try to give some answers to the who, why, what, how, and when. And as it shall be given you. So let's get started. And let's get, I think it's, there we go. I think you already had a really long introduction. So I studied at Oxford University, focusing on information engineering, looking at robotics, signal processing, and in particular applied to medical devices. And later on, I completed my studies at Harvard Business School, at Singularity University at NASA. I also work with Stockholm Resilience Center. And for those who are familiar with it, they publish research about planetary boundaries. So what are the existential threats, not just facing humanity, but facing our planet as a whole. And I have several different careers throughout the years. I graduated as an engineer and worked as a software programmer at a robotics company. And later I joined the Swedish Army. I was the intelligence officer with the Army for 4 years before working with IBM, heading up the data analytics practice for 5 years. And later I started a few different ventures and doing investing into technology startups, mainly in digital health sectors. And nowadays, I call myself a catalyst for change, and as well as a seeker or harmonizer. And here, I just want to share 2 pictures, and it's 10 years between those 2 pictures. And not everything is what it seems. And in terms of my own personal revolution and evolution, it's not something that I could predict it myself. So in 2008, I started with pole dancing, and that's not something I imagined myself would get into. However, that has been one of the things that really changed my life. Doing pole dancing because one of the IT department, his girlfriend was into pole dancing, and who introduced me to it. And I've never done any dancing before up until that point. And it was the first time when I tried pole dancing, I was able to do a split for the very first time ever. And at that time, I was already in my mid-20s. And this is time where, sorry, I think the presentation just stopped. Let me continue doing. Can you see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Because it just stopped showing on my screen, so I'm not really sure if it's still showing on yours. Okay, so there we are. And so that was the first time I was able to do a split. And I think up to that point in my life, I had this limiting belief thinking that if someone wants to do a split or learn to dance, you should have started really young. And this was I think by the second or third time when I tried it, I was able to do it. So I realized actually it's a combination of the right technique, the right coaching and guidance, as well as not having those limiting beliefs. And I think funny enough, so the dance studio that I attended was called North Pole Studio. So 5 years after I first started pole dancing, I skied to the North Pole. And almost a decade later, I skied to the South Pole. I think just by planting a seed in your head, and it will lead to very different things. So in no ways would I expecting myself to be skiing to the both poles or be a pole dancer at all. And I think when we look back like 2008, it was a time when iPhone has only been around for about a year. YouTube was just released and there was no videos that where people could share. So a lot has changed in just 10 years time. So I just want you guys to bear that in mind, that if 10 years could change so much in terms of my personal life, what I could do for a bigger community city. So if we have any limiting beliefs, I think this is the time for us to completely abolish it. So the moral of that story really is that we cannot connect the dots looking forward, but we can only see it backward. However, we have different feelings and intuitions, and we can use that to look into the future. But before I do that, I just want to show you this video. It's from the Jetsons. It's something I watched in the 80s growing up. So let's see if we can play it.
George Jetson his boy Elroy coming to me. Change is right.
Great. So that was the kind of city of the future that we pictured back in the 80s. I want you to pay particular attention to the car, the vehicle that they were able to fold up right into their briefcase. And let me just connect to the next slide. I think it's a bit slow, so let me just get out and restart it. Yes, and any ideas once you plant the seed just happen. So I just want you to show you this is folding electric cars. Oh, sorry, my internet connection is not very stable. Folding electric car. This was a video from around 2012. I'll just play it. Well, you get the idea, so I'm just going to stop you here. And this car has was very promising when it came out, and I think the reason most of us don't remember it is because it ultimately failed. Not so much in terms of maybe the concept, however, in terms of execution, in terms of running the project and having the technology, being able to scale it, ultimately failed. And so that's why I want to talk a little bit about why is the world the way it is, and it's because our belief has shaped our world. So when we look at indigenous communities from around the world, and they believe in that nature, matter, and spirit, it's all around us. It's all together. We're all interconnected. However, when we came to, for example, the time of the Egyptians, they worship many gods. However, the gods are more removed. They are not in our everyday life, but rather they govern our life from faraway places. Then we come to world religion of modern times. Now, instead of worshiping many gods, we are worshiping one God, and this one God is really far removed from us, even more so than previously. And then moving to the age of Newton, which is the most recent times. And Newton, during his time, when he realized that, we are not the center of the solar system, we are not the center of our universe, he's in stark contradiction of the religious leader that was leading at the time. So in order for him to comply with the religion, so he decided, we're also only going to look at more on study the physicalities of objects, leaving the spiritual matter to the church. And this is when the separation of the spirit and matter occurred. And that's really a reflection of the world we live today. However, nowadays we know that really energy is all one, that we have the knowledge of quantum physics, quantum mechanics, knowing that really matter and energy and vibration is all one and same. So really a lot of reflection of the things that we see in the world is because we have separated something that we really couldn't be separated. So before I take that further, before we ask the question why do we need cities at all? What's the function of the city? Why do we evolve? So we're looking back a long way back to 4,000 million years ago, looking at single-celled life. And we realized that there's a certain structural repeat of everything that happens and since the beginning of the universe. And there's certain patterns that we could learn. And so this is what I'm going to show in the phase one of the evolution. We're starting with very simple bacteria, who is one of the smallest unit of consciousness because they could sense their environment and respond to their environment, which means they have perception and awareness. And that's the definition of intelligence. And what's the next phase of the evolution is that these bacteria get together into a colony of bacteria so that they could share resources, they could share knowledge, and they could share their intelligence. And then eventually they'll evolve into a single-celled organism, in this case, amoeba. And their membrane, the cell membrane, is their contact with the outer world. And the more intelligence one of these cells have, the bigger the membrane is. So I'm going to show another picture. Here is a neocortex of a rat compared with the neocortex of the brain of a human. As we can see, the difference is that in terms of the air surface area of the brain, and compare it with, for example, the membrane of the single-celled organism, is that the more intelligent we have, the more surface areas we have. However, there's a limit to how big that surface area we could create. So when there's a stop in the next phase of evolution, usually this single cells gets together to form a colony of cells. So in that phase, the different cells in a human body, there are 50 trillion cells, and none of these cells hasn't existed before humans. So they all had their purposes. However, in a human, all these 50 trillion cells come together to work as one to serve the human. So the next phase of humanity is for the human to act as a single cell and to operate collectively together with the human as a community, together as a humanity, and that will be our next phase of evolution. So what's the next phase and how would that look like? It means that each person, not only we need to try to be the best person we could be, but also we try to be the best person we could be as community. That means we need to be inclusive, we need to collaborate, we need to be harmonious, and we need to be aware and respond to our surroundings and our environment. And anything that goes against those will ultimately be the way that we fail ourselves, because there are empires that come and goes, there's species that come and go, and there's nothing that tells the human will be here forever. So looking at how do we then take those ideas and put that into practical things in terms of creating a city, creating a smart city. And this is something that I've taken from the Chinese cities that are doing planning for new cities, so something they have deemed that's important. The first of all is to preserve nature and culture, preserve what's already there and deciding what do we want to keep. And second of all is to mix. Mix is about mixed use, mix different culture groups, mix different areas of use. And the third is build a city that's walkable, build a city where people want to walk, and build a city where people can bike with their bike lanes, and build a city where people can connect. And they're also looking at mass transportation, like rides, and then also finally just really make the focus, shift the focus back to humans, back to the people, back to the citizens in the city, because ultimately all this is really just creating an environment in which each individual could survive, not just survive, but also thrive. Instead of, in a city where we give lots of areas to cars, we give lots of meaning to buildings and animate objects instead of taking the focus back to the people. So why is the next 10 years probably the most important 10 years we can think of? Because this is the 10 year where we're really gonna reach a point to decide whether or not our civilization is on its way down, or are we going to change our ways? Because obviously what we're doing things are not sustainable. So we need to focus on individual well-being, empowered individuals, looking at community well-being, the relationship between the people. And only then can we look at smart cities, because cities are built of people. And just like within a cell, we want every single cell within a body to be healthy and to serve the whole. So do we need every single person to be that of the community. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about a project I was part of as recently as the end of last year. So this is actually in Hubei province. It's called Wudang. It's the mountain where Tai Chi and Qigong originated. And there people still live very slow paced life and still very much in harmony with nature. And the idea is about creating a city that uses some of the principles that I mentioned, and essentially creating what Silicon Valley did for technology, but using the principle and the knowledge that we have from the Asian traditions pair deal with the latest development and research in everything from longevity to stem cell, looking at what's the best way, creating space for people to thrive. We'll leave with final question is that really Earth as a whole is like a cell, as an intelligent cell. And if we humans can be in harmony and symbiosis with nature together as a one whole intelligence, I do believe ultimately we'll be able to perhaps communicate with other intelligence in the universe. So that might be our next evolution. So that was all, and I'll stop sharing, and I'll be open to any questions.
Great presentation, May, as usual, and you have such a rich background. Couldn't expect nothing less than what you brought us. Is because in the meantime, people can ask you questions, but I heard also Tim and the others already, and I'm going to address that message also, my next final message. But my question for you, and one of them, at least I have some, don't want to take too much time, but my first question is related with a lot of people think that all these smart cities concepts, that it's true. We started with some industry-driven, technology-driven 10, 15 years ago or more, but it was something related with bits and bytes and some sensors and some industry technology that could be implemented for digitalizing the cities. But as you mentioned, this is so old. It's like our own existence as human beings. And we are not taking seriously this part of the well-being and the part of the spiritual side of the cities. And that's why I want to ask you this. That's why we also see some unbalanced evolution in some places.
Yeah, exactly. I think we are not living in reality. We're living our perception of reality as a layer of construct above that. And if our perception of reality is very different from the actual reality, eventually our perception will get challenged, as it has been throughout human history. That there are concepts that no longer can stand, that can no longer be sustainable. Those will be the things that will go away. So in terms of when we're looking at the 4 different myths that we have about the world. For example, Darwin said survival of the fittest. He actually got it wrong. It's a survival of the most harmonious, most collaborative. So any species that got really introduced to a new environment who has more power to be contributing more to that environment will be the one that stays. That's why we are adapted exactly as we need to be for our environment. That's why there's no polar bears in Africa, because they are each perfectly adapted to bring harmony to their own environment.
So as someone has experienced and talking with lots of people around the world, startups, public administration, governments, people that come to you and with a lot of ideas in their minds, what do you tell them to do first? What is the first?
I think first is really to revert back to the belief system and principles that resulted in whatever outcome. So for example, if we really believe survival of the fittest, that will create a certain type of society, that will create certain type of products and certain type of behavior. And that all can be traced back into that one idea, one belief. What if that belief is not true? What if the opposite of that belief is true? What if we have adopted the opposite belief? What kind of world would we create? So it's really going back to first principle and to analyze, is even though this is a current belief that's held by the majority of people today, is a belief that we want to take into the future, is a belief that we want to stick with. And I just want to point back to where I started. In just 10 years, a lot of things has changed, and we're just talking about 10 years. When we're looking at building city, we are hopefully looking at building for the future in more than a decade.
It's pretty amazing. In 10 years, we probably, making the right correspondence, we were all doing the pole dancing. I was playing guitar, for example, or something like that. So we were all experiencing some things that were useful for to the growth, to the community, to the empowerment of the future.
So yes, I think if I have any advice, that would be for our personal empowerment. We have created a community and society in which we have taken the power away from people. We put them in education system where they feel like they don't know everything there needs to know. They feel like they are, once they go into workspace, they feel like they're starting at the bottom. However, every person have their own unique gifts. And it's about our personal responsibility to discover those gifts. So I think I would just really encourage you, if there are things you're curious about, if there are things that you feel interested in, those are the signs you owe it to yourself to develop those curiosity and follow your bliss.
Okay, it's a Friday afternoon. The weather is good in some places. I believe that Portugal is sunny, sunshine. Here in Athens also a bit warm. No more questions to May. If there's no, we release her because she's between meetings on the digital virtual meetings, and we definitely, it's honored to have you here with us, May, and thank you so much for your contribution and your sharing with us your ideas, especially the Jetsons. It's so nostalgic to listen again to the Jetsons, and of course I bring Wizard of Oz, you bring the Jetsons, maybe someone else in the next presentations will bring us something, if it's not cancelled or removed from online in the meantime.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and bye-bye. Okay, so we are arriving to the end, and the end is not the end. Basically, it's just a step to finish this conversation. We are only with 2 hours and 30 minutes online, more or less. So this says much about what is organizing an event online. We can skip the flaws, we can skip the problems. We have some. Hopefully, these conditions will be improved in the future. Now everyone realizes that it's become trendy. It's become one momentum for the virtual meetings and remote events. So we go to my final remarks. I'm going into some slides, not many, but actually I bring what it is, the Global Association to Build Gnostic and Enlightened Smart Cities. We already, we can be discussing a lot in this stage. We do it also. We have among our organization people that are very have a big background in technology, ICT, and even related with the project development in cities around the world. But basically, it's like we need to get something else, or we need to get something more added to this equation of intelligence and intelligent communities and smart cities now as installed. So we've been walking a path with too many intersections and crossroads. Always pushed by visions of the future and experiences from the past, and many times not getting any lessons learned. So here we are today around the world. Amazing cities flash into our screens and become impossible to resist and visit. It's impossible to resist and visit Dubai, Singapore, other New York, other amazing. I don't, of course, you can mention Paris and London all the time. There's always Paris. Amazing built paradises of fashion, wealth, modernity that we all want to experience, causing in so many frustrations and disappointments, besides the true reality of what lies beneath. Unsustainable progress, inequality, and unbalanced happiness most of the times. But in the meantime, a new version of the future utopic cities is born and included in the master plan of the new society. It's more sustainable, greener, innovative, etc. Like Tirana, in this case, the capital of Albania, or Punta Cana, Mexico, with both of the projects are from the same architect office. But these projects most of the times are born without discussion, are created in the autistic bubble of men and women that are famous and recognized by their amazing abilities and competence, but fail to be adopted by the common people. And these examples I bring here are being featured in the media from today. There are cases that are going to be reality or not. We don't know. Like we can bring this one. It's already mentioned by Joe. It's been cancelled. Google Sidewalk Alphabet project in Toronto was already cancelled, despite all the amazing future applications of the most disruptive technology. But citizens didn't want that. And so they decided to cancel this project. But it was featured, it was communicated, it was a lot of marketing around the last few years when we stopped talking about it. So here's where it lies the biggest problem. We are not considering for smart cities nowadays. So the flexibility, like the flexibility, regulations, the establishment, openness, and specific ecosystems to make ideas thrive and turn to investment, jobs, progress, and happy society. In most of the cases, it doesn't work. Even the richest spot on earth, Silicon Valley, is flawed. People survive nowadays and don't even have the spirit to live a life or enjoy the short trip we all have in this world. So basically, it's a message that Tim and May already touched. We are trying to get a lot of richness, a lot of success, and we don't understand what can be the real goal for our lives. This is also that we are observing around the world that the ones in charge, sometimes they choose the hard path actually. And then one must think how smart can be to invest millions of dollars of public budgets in something that doesn't solve or help the citizens. This is the actual clash between sensibilities that are driven by industry and by social pulse. So basically, we have two paths, two thinking path. One is the technology-driven. The other one is the human perspective. Actually, I'm going to make sure that we have a balanced mix between them. Otherwise, it will be a clash, a permanent clash between society. This is the ideology clash that the world is crossing and experiencing the hard way. Cities are the ecosystem, and around the world they are sensible for different priorities according to their own citizens, majorities, or interests. So liberal cities, for example, have other priorities, rather conservative, and this ideology pulse will be stopping any hope for development because the clash will be permanent. It's the wrong side of history that we must avoid experience. This is the time to choose another path, the path that can help us to fight from within, fight the news, and these art terms are represented by so many fake, addictive, disruptive, and innovative gadgets and material stuff that take our humanity and poison our souls. So this can be some philosophical approach, but actually we all experience this in every day. We are challenged, defied by anything, even though it's like a parking spot or a traffic light or whatever makes us feel angry with something, stressed. So we need to fight this, and we need to understand how can we improve this situation? We have to find the full potential of ourselves and our cities, a path that makes us accept us as we are and don't try to change us or influence us, influence ourselves to become what we are. This can be the real smart city, in which direction we need to start walking. The yellow brick road, not only because it's made of gold, but because it has other kinds of treasures and rewards: happiness, freedom, fraternity, empathy, love, and in most of the cases, a house, a place to live and to stay the night. This is something that the world was not paying attention before the pandemic COVID-19. I believe it's not paying attention after the crisis. So we need a new enlightenment and a new renaissance. There are alternatives and we can work hard to find them together. And there was a time very recently where it was possible to discuss, debate, and find a common ground. The smart city movement brought this opportunity to dialogue between industry, activists, governments, investors, to sit around the same table, and we need to recover this fast, because in the meantime it was blocked or interrupted again. So we need to start building bridges again. Must create the right ecosystem where ideas are not owned, creativeness is fed, tolerance and openness are strong pillars, and with this peaceful atmosphere, we will have the tools to change procurement, heavy bureaucracy, regulations, and focus on what could be the real intelligence to build a new world for our future generations. A new world fairer, more tolerant, rather than radical or divisionary. It's a totally alternative path with just one interest in impulse: ethics, values, transparency, and common public good. So you may be asking now, well, this sounds like an even bigger utopia than smart city itself, because it sounds that we are discussing different things, but actually, yes, this is the big question we may be asking ourselves right now: how we build, how we contribute. So we believe it's possible to build. It's not possible to build anything without a project. So the initial step, the one that will define what will be the rest of the journey, the first step that will include or not all the values that the building will be funded with. Then we also need to spread the word. We need to communicate, dialogue, talk permanently. Things can't be hidden or closed in some fancy offices or big corporations or even universities. The more respectful they are, but we need to add transparency to all these projects, to all this process and projects. And we already mentioned the PPPs. They are such bad word nowadays because a lot of things happen, bad things happen, especially in some countries that we don't need to mention, but we have a bad idea about the PPP, but it's not so bad for other countries and other realities. And they are fundamental to build. It's impossible to have a future without jobs, without private sector, without economy, without people risking and investing. We have to create an ethical and transparent platform that removes all these mental boundaries for the public-private partnerships. We can only do this with credibility, and we can only do this with talented and creative people to take this step forward. Yes, managers and bureaucrats are important, fundamental also. We cannot skip them, but we cannot still go on copy-pasting projects. We need to disrupt, be creative, and connect all the silos in our society for a greater good. And yes, I'm not talking about post-its or other external brainstorm meetings. We have a lot of this already. I'm talking about real and proved talent that exists, and it's silent, depressed, in some of the cases frustrated for not being able to give more. So we need to find the right ecosystem to let them come up and show what they are truly committed to to their society. That's why we created the association. Is the main purpose of our association, created in 2018. You already know by our website all the details, all the kind of work we can do, what kind of projects we can mix and contribute. But actually, this is supposed to be a kickstart of a new era of strategy, thinking, and planning of smart cities. It has to be built with everyone and for everybody through the last months, human values that must be the cornerstone of any edification. And this special interest about bringing down egocentrism, materialism, indifference, superficial concepts and ideas. So it's time to give stage to the ones that can create, can be innovative and stimulate visionaries. And also, it's time to stop a little bit with the false expectations with the future. Future is already, it's already here. Like the first slide I show you New York City, past, present, and the future, and Dubai is already the future. The other cities are. And this is also important to build a world with best cities. What we heard today with some of our amazing members and speakers is inspiring. We can do this. We can do this, and just interrupt this because we need to open to conversation. We can do this. We can find the yellow brick roads and start following it. And these two things are completely, they are connected, of course. To walk a road and a path, we need to find first where's the entrance, where the entrance is. So both are hard. It's hard to find the first, the beginning, and it's also hard to walk it with so many distractions, so many hidden pitfalls and traps. And that's the reason we cannot do it alone. We can't do it alone. No one can build nothing by itself. So let's launch a quick Q&A. Someone has something to add to this, I believe, interesting, amazing conversation, and you can now turn on your audio and give your contribution. It will be interesting to know what is your thoughts about this. And of course, we can also continue to promote these events. It's something that we cannot stop. And we have a lot of events for the last years, but actually we need some juice, some communication, some content that can make people inspired. And I believe we have the right people to help on that mission.